Thank you, Janki Ramji. I thank Ram, Ravi, Sajni, Beena, Janki Ramji, all the people who are involved in organizing and conducting this program. My gratitude to all of them. My gratitude to all the participants who come with so much of sincerity and interest, enthusiasm, faith to be a part of this satsang. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to explore Bhagwan's wisdom with all of you. Thank you so much. So, as Janki Ramji said, last time we went through the summary of Karma Yoga, and then we went on to Bhakti Yoga. We looked at one shloka of Bhakti Yoga. So today let us chant that one shloka, and I'll just share the presentation. One moment. Is the presentation visible to all of you?
Yes, madam.
Thank you so much. We had begun Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga, Bhagwan outlines for us in shlokas 6 through 10. So last time we had done the 6th shloka. Let's chant it together. Just recollect the meaning and then move on to the next shloka. Uttamastavat ucchamandatah Uttamastavat ucchamandatah Chittajam japa dhyanamuttamam Chittajam japa dhyanamuttamam. So as Janki Ram also summarized for us at the beginning of this session, better than hymns of praise. By hymns of praise, Ramana Maharshi is talking about the Ashtotras and Sahasranamas and Suktas, etc., which are a little long. So better than these long hymns of praise, Bhagwan is saying, is the repetition of a single name or a short mantra. And that is, it becomes japa. So in japa also, he gives us different categories. Better soft than loud. Better to chant in the mind than soft. And in the mind, it is even better if the nama or the name can just blossom in the heart out of love or devotion, just spontaneously blossom rather than being repeated. But even better than all these, Ramana Maharshi says, is meditation. So when we were looking at how japa and karma yoga is useful for chitta shuddhi, that means purifying the mind, so that the mind can come from bahu chintana to eka chintana. Right now, the mind keeps jumping from thought to thought, from subject to subject, from emotion to emotion. So that is called lack of chitta shuddhi. When there is chitta shuddhi, as the mind starts getting more and more refined, we are able to focus, to concentrate without effort. The without effort is very important. We need to underline that. So the less effort it takes to keep the mind just resting rather than focused, I would use the verb resting. Resting on a certain object or a deity or a concept or whatever it is, that is the highest truth to us at present. To keep the mind resting on that effortlessly, that is chitta shuddhi, eka chintana. So we also looked at the true story of Poonjaji, Harivamshlal Poonjaji. If we go to the internet and if we type HWL Poonjaji, we will be able to read his own his own narration of what happened to him, as well as what his disciples have said about it. So it makes very interesting reading. You could go online and look at it. So we did look at his experience, how he came to Bhagwan. He was chanting the Nama of Krishna continuously for several years, from childhood, from the age of 8. At the age of 34, he came to Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi, and how Bhagwan helped him to establish himself in the self. So that I will not go through again, just recollecting. So we are going, what is bhakti? We did look at what is japa, but now that we are going into bhakti yoga, what do we mean by bhakti? This is something that we need to decipher, or we need to define a little more concretely. So what are the different definitions that are given? There are 4 definitions given by the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita says that there are 4 kinds of devotees. One is Artha. Artha means the devotee who comes to God when he is in dire trouble. He is having a catastrophe in his life, some kind of a crisis, maybe health crisis, financial crisis, or a family crisis, or a business crisis, or any kind of crisis in his life. And he feels helpless, he or she feels helpless, and a higher force is needed to intervene at that point of time, to give us at least security, stability, and also some feeling of hope that things will turn out well. So we turn to this higher force in whatever form we conceptualize it, and we can relate to it. So that is the Artha Bhakta, who turns to the Lord in times of trouble. Then we have the Artharthi. Artha means wealth, prosperity. So when the devotee wants something, wants a promotion, wants to get married, or wants to get children married, or wants a child, any kind of thing that is not happening easily, even after repeated effort, it is not happening. So then the Artharthi Bhakti, the Bhakta, that devotee turns to the Lord and asks for help in getting what he wants. Then we have the Jignasu. Jignasu is a devotee who is interested out of intellectual curiosity, by reading the scriptures, by looking at philosophy, by exploring with various learned people. He or she tries to come to a concept of what is God. Then we have the Jnani. The Jnani is the one who is already established in the self. He knows that his own true nature is divinity. God is not separate from him. Still, he may go on relating to God in different ways outwardly. So these are the 4 kinds of devotees. Now we have actually, I put a picture here of Sudama. Sudama, he was a Sakha. He was always looking upon Krishna as a dear friend, because they studied in the same Gurukula, under the same Guru. Though Krishna was a prince and Sudama was a poor boy coming from a Brahmin family, there was no equality in social status or in financial status. In a Gurukula, the Guru treats all students equally. They're all on an equal footing in the Gurukula. So their friendship blossomed. They were very, very close friends. And then later they lost touch. And we know the story of how Sudama could not make ends meet. He had many children. His wife was called Sushila. So in spite of great efforts, he was not even able to feed his family every day. They were in those dire circumstances. And at that time, Krishna was the king of Dwarka. So his wife Sushila one day told Sudama, why don't you go and talk to your friend? You know, he is the king of Dwarka. I'm sure he will help you. But Sudama didn't like, he felt that it is like exploiting a friendship. So he was very reluctant. But after a lot of persuading by his wife, he takes up some poha or avalaki and he goes to Dwaraka, where he is welcomed with great joy by Krishna and Rukmini. You see in the picture, Krishna is actually performing the Pada Puja of Sudama. So Sudama stays there for about 2 to 3 days in the luxury of the palace. But all the time, his mind is thinking, I am eating from these golden plates, but my children, my poor children are starving. Even in the presence of Lord Krishna, he is unable to verbalize a request for help. He just spends time with Krishna without saying anything. He goes away. The poha that he has brought is a great delicacy for Krishna. He eats it. And when Sudama goes back, we see that in the place of his hut is a mansion. His whole family is well dressed. His poverty is gone. And Sudama spends the rest of his days, we learn, in great austerity and devotion. So here I am not saying that Sudama was a Artharthi Bhakta. We can think more that his wife was a Artharthi. She wanted better things for herself and her family, and she asked Sudama to go there. Sudama was all the time only in Sakha Bhava with Krishna, but because of his wife's persuasion, he came. And this we can think of as Artharthi. Something was required, so we turn to the Lord. Then we have Draupadi. The story is very well known. When Dushasana was trying to strip Draupadi of her sari, how Krishna kept on making the sari longer and longer, infinitely long, so that he could not strip it off. Draupadi also was in a relationship of Sakha, Sakhi. She thought of Krishna as a very dear friend. So I'm not saying that Draupadi was a Artha Bhakta. I'm just taking this as this incident as an example, that when somebody in the family is in the ICU, or someone is in great trouble, or we ourselves are facing some kind of a very difficult circumstances, challenges in life, we are not able to make the recovery from it. Then if we turn to God, in Kannada they have a nice way of saying it, Sankata Bandaka Venkata Ramana. That means whenever I get troubles, then I think of God. The important thing in both cases is at least the devotee thinks of God. That is why Krishna classifies both as devotees. So then we come Kunti, in fact, if you think of her. Kunti, she's very famous for asking the boon of Krishna, please keep on giving me troubles and tribulations always, so that my mind can be turned ever towards you in supplication. So that is also Artha, devotion. Then we have Jignasu. We have this picture here, a scholar sitting and at the bottom of the page next to Hanuman, we see a scholar sitting and reading books. So there was this this boy who met a sage. He wanted to get into a very close relationship with God. He wanted to find out all about God. He was very curious. So he asked that sage, can you show me how to see God? So then the sage said, I can initiate you into a mantra. You keep on doing japa of that mantra, and then you will become closer and closer. You will start feeling closer and closer to God, and then you will progress on the path of bhakti. This boy was not satisfied. So he went to another great scholar, Vedic scholar, and he studied under him in that Gurukula for about 12 years. He was expert in all the Vedas, in all the Upanishads. And one day he told his master, I have learned whatever you have taught me, I have learned. But I don't feel a closeness to God. I don't feel that I have been able to find out who God is. So then that Guru says, I will initiate you into a mantra. You keep on repeating that mantra and you will start feeling a closeness to God. Then the scholar realizes it is good to know, it is good to study, but at the same time, an effort should be made to come into a relationship with God. That is very important. Then we have this picture of Hanuman at the bottom. The story of Hanuman is also very well known. How he used to serve Lord Rama without even a thought for his own comfort. So one day, the whole war with Ravana is over. They have come back to Ayodhya. Rama is crowned as the king of Ayodhya. And they're all sitting in the royal court. All the Vanaras are there and Hanuman is there. All the people who helped in the war are there. Rama, Sita are sitting on the throne. And Rama says, I am so grateful to all the Vanaras. You have been of immense help to me. I could not have vanquished Ravana without all your help. So I would like to show my gratitude to you. So I'm going to distribute gifts to all the Vanaras before they leave for their own kingdom. So he distributes gifts to all the Vanaras. Then Mother Hanuman is still sitting there. Ram has not called him to receive anything. Then Mother Sita says, she takes out a beautiful pearl necklace which is around her neck and she holds it up. And she says, I'm going to give this to the person who has done the most selfless service, to Rama. So many people are there. Each one thinks, maybe that necklace is meant for me. Maybe Sita Mata is talking about me. They're all looking expectantly. The only one who is not expecting anything is Hanuman. And then Sita says, I want to give this necklace to Hanuman. Hanuman, please come and take the necklace. So Hanuman comes, he receives the necklace, and then he goes back and sits down. And very strangely, he begins to break that necklace. Each pearl, he breaks the string of pearls, then he takes each pearl, he's biting it and then throwing it away, biting it and throwing it away. Everybody is astounded. Hanuman is actually behaving like a monkey. Why is he doing this? So one of them says, what are you doing, Hanumanji? Why are you doing this? So Hanuman says, I'm just seeing whether these very valuable pearls, they have Rama inside them. I don't want to keep anything which does not have my Lord in it. So then this actually, it is not that he can't see the Lord in the pearls, but he wants to teach a lesson to all the people in the court who are proud of having achieved something in the war. Whereas actually, the Lord is responsible for the victory. No individual is responsible. The self is responsible for every action. So he wants to bring this principle into the forefront. So then some people in the court will start saying, Hanuman, if you're saying all that, what about you? What about your body? No, the Lord is not in your body also. So how can you say that you will keep things only when the Lord resides in it? So immediately Hanuman, it is said, he tore his breast apart and everybody could see Rama and Sita enshrined in his heart. So this is also allegorical, metaphorical to say that a true Jnani is always aware that the Lord is within him and in everything around him. So these are the 4 types of devotees. But in the first 3 types, if we see in the Artha, the one who turns to the Lord in distress, the Artharthi, the one who turns to the Lord when he wants something badly, the Jignasu, the one who turns to the Lord because he wants to understand the nature of the Lord. So in all 3, the stream of attention is sporadic. When there is a dire difficulty, attention flows to the Lord. After the difficulty is over, a little gratitude, then Lord is forgotten. Next difficulty, again attention flows to the Lord. So it is sporadic. Artha Bhakti is sporadic. Artharthi, also sporadic. When you want something, a great deal with a lot of intensity, it means the world to you, turn to God, make a prayer. After you get it, little gratitude, then you forget. Then again, when you want something, turn to the Lord. So sporadic, on and off, on and off. Jignasu also, if that intensity is not there, he or she may study while studying the scriptures, while chanting the scriptures, etc. The remembrance of the Lord may be there. After that activity is over, come back to regular routine, the Lord is forgotten. So again we see attention, flow of attention is sporadic. Only in the Jnani, it is constant. So this is how Bhagavad Gita, one definition given by the Bhagavad Gita about Bhakti. So how does this relate to the 7th shloka of Upadeshasara? Let us chant the shloka. I will chant once and we'll chant together the second time. Ajyadharaya srotasa samam, Ajyadharaya srotasa samam, Sarala chintanam viralatah param, Sarala chintanam viralatah param. Ajya is ghee. Ajyadharaya, dhara is flow. Ajyadharaya, like the flow of ghee. How should a devotee's attention towards the Lord be? It should be like the flow of ghee. If you have poured ghee, melted ghee, from one container to another, it is very continuous in its flow. You can see that flow is connecting the container from which we are pouring it to the container into which we are pouring it. There is a continuous column of liquid that is connecting the both of them. So Ajyadharaya, the attention of a devotee, the devotion of a devotee, should be a constant flow like the flow of ghee, of melted ghee. Srotasa samam. Srotasa is the stream of water. Why is Bhagavan referring both to flow of ghee and stream of water? Water, all of us know, stagnant water can get very, very dirty, right? Moss can grow in it, all bacteria can develop in it, mosquitoes can start propagating in it, insects can come into the stagnant pool of water, it can start stinking. So if the mind becomes inert, it becomes out of tamas, out of inertia, the mind is it is concerned only about its own welfare, absorbed in itself. Instead of thinking about the Lord, it is absorbed in thoughts of its own comfort, its own welfare. So that is like a stagnant pool. It can start stinking after some time. It can become very impure. Whereas a mind that has chitta shuddhi, which is very pure, it is like flowing water. All of us know flowing water is pure. Of course, now we have made rivers impure. Otherwise, flowing water was always considered so pure. When we went for picnics when we were young, we would just fill our water bottles from flowing rivers, a vessel or a cup from a flowing river, and drink it without purifying it in any way. Now it's difficult to do that. But here Bhagavan is saying a flowing source of water is so pure, it's pristine. So when your mind is like a flowing stream or a flowing river, so pristine, so pure, so selfless, all the time focused on the highest principle of truth, which you conceptualize as God, maybe with a form, maybe with a name, maybe as a concept itself. So towards that, a pure mind, just like a pure flowing stream of water is flowing so continuously, like pouring ghee from one container to another. Samam means just like. Ajya dharaya srotasa samam. Like ghee that is poured continuously, like a stream of ghee, or a stream of very pure, pristine water. Sarala chintanam. Here, sarala means continuous. Chintanam, thought. One single continuous stream of thought. A whole stream of devotion. A feeling is also a thought. So here Ramana Maharshi is referring to the flow of devotion, continuous flow of devotion, sarala chintanam, continuous flow of thought or devotion. Viralatah param. Viralatah means interrupted, discontinuous. Param is better. So a continuous flow of devotion towards the Lord whom you worship is much better than a broken flow. So in the earlier example of Artha, Artharthi, Jignasu, we saw that there are broken spurts of devotion. One flow, cut. Then no flow for a long time. Then again one flow, cut. But here, the more continuous you can make it, the better it is, Bhagavan says. So, if we look at, there are other definitions of bhakti also. How to develop this continuous flow? In the earlier part, where there is artharthi or artha, again there is self-centeredness. There is a stagnant pool, and from that stagnant pool, now and then you see a flow going out. So still there is mainly self-interest. I am in trouble, therefore help me. I need something, therefore bestow it upon me. So it is broken. You're not in a continuous relationship. The relationship is when I'm in trouble or when I need something, I will turn to you and you will help me. But you need more than that. For devotion to be constant, for devotion to be continuous, you need to live in a relationship with God. You can select what kind of bhava, what kind of attitude you want in that relationship based on your own temperament. Say the Narada Bhakti Sutra, says the Bhagavatam, says all the treatises which are describing bhakti. So here at the top in the left corner, we see Hanuman. Hanuman is in Dasya Bhava. Dasya, the Lord is my master, I am his servant. That is the kind of relationship that Hanuman has towards Rama, and continuously he is immersed in that relationship. When you have a strong relationship with somebody, automatically thoughts of that person will keep coming into your mind. If you think of somebody in the house, let us say our son or daughter, or has gone abroad, is living abroad, still when the mother or father, when they go around the house, they go about their routine, somewhere in the background, the thought of that child is always there. You are making coffee. Oh, my son used to like coffee like this, very strong. You are making upma. Oh, my son never liked upma. Now that he's not there, I'm making it. But if he had been there, probably I would be making dosa for him. You go watch the TV. My son used to sit here and watch TV. He used to like these shows. So constantly, without any effort, the mind is flowing towards that loved child. he or she who has gone abroad. Without effort, the parent is thinking of that child. So in the same way, Anjaneya or Hanuman is always thinking, how can I serve Rama? What can I do to serve Rama? What would Rama like? How would Rama like me to do this? So it is said that finally, after everything was over, the war was over, responsibilities were allotted to different people and nothing was left for Hanuman to do. No seva was left. So then Hanuman said, whenever you yawn, I will come and snap my fingers near your mouth, he tells Rama. So because of that, you don't know when Rama will yawn. So Hanuman is always with Rama. So this is also allegorical. It is not that physically you have to be with the Lord, but inside, all the time you have to be with the Lord. When we looked at Jagata Ishadi, Yukta Sevanam, Ashtamurti Bhrit Deva Pujanam, also we saw you can see the Lord in everything around you, in everybody around you, and in yourself. So all the time you are serving the Lord. So that is Dasya Bhava. Then we have below Hanuman, we have Prahlada. Prahlada was always in Shanta Bhava. Shanta means very peaceful, very confident, like a child relating to God as a parent. So Prahlada, Narayana or Vishnu was his father. That's how he thought of Lord Vishnu. So whatever his physical father, his biological father, Hiranyakashipu did, we see in the picture there are snakes which Hiranyakashipu wanted to bite his own son and kill him. He pushed him from a hill. He set fire to him. So he tried in so many ways to destroy his own son because his son was always chanting the name of Lord Vishnu. But throughout this whole ordeal, Prahlada was not at all perturbed. He was very calm. Why? He was so confident that Lord Vishnu will take care of him. Like a small child. You have a 1-year-old child or 2-year-old child. The child may get into mischief, that child may do all kinds of things, but all the time the child is very sure, my mother will take care of me, my father will take care of me. I don't have to worry. I am accepted, I am taken care of, I am protected. That confidence is there. So that is Shanta Bhava. You are thinking of the God as a parent who will always protect you, take care of you. Then we have Sudama in the center on top. So Sudama's story we already went through. Sudama had a friendly feeling towards Krishna. Krishna is my equal. Krishna is my friend. I can say anything I want to Krishna. I can talk whatever I want to Krishna. So in your mind, you can always have a constant conversation with the Lord because the Lord is your friend. To a very close friend, we can say whatever we want, like, right, we can say anything. The closest things, the most things which we keep secret from everybody else, the innermost recesses of our being, we can lay bare to a friend and say, look, it is like this. So what should I do about this? As a friend, what will you advise me? So that is on being a friendly footing, the Sakhya relationship with the Lord. Then next to Sudama, we have Yashoda and baby Krishna. That's called Vatsalya Bhava, the attitude of a parent towards the child. So you look at the Lord as a small child, as a baby. Yashoda brought up Krishna. So she looked upon the Lord as her own child. Many of us, we have a maternal or paternal feeling very strong within us. That characteristic is very strong within us. Then this bhava will appeal to us. Look upon the Lord as a baby, to be nourished, to be nurtured, to be protected, to be loved. Just like a mother who is doing various tasks in the house, but when the baby is walking around, a toddler is walking around, 90% of her attention is on the toddler. What is my child doing? I don't want him to get hurt. Yet I want him to be able to explore things, to learn things, to understand things. At the same time, I need to protect him from hurting himself or herself. So that kind of a parental attitude, that is called Vatsalya. Then below Yashoda and Krishna, we have a picture of Bharata. How Bharata ruled the kingdom instead of Rama till Rama returned from the forest. For 14 years, Bharata ruled the kingdom by placing the padukas, the footwear of Rama on the throne. And he was just merely an agent of Rama, ruling the king, a representative of Rama. So that is called Bhratritva. That means you look upon the Lord as a sibling, your own brother or sister. You relate to the Lord with that kind of informal feeling. Then in the center at the bottom, we have Radha and Krishna. That is the Madhura Bhava. Radha was always thinking of Krishna. So she wanted to be with Krishna always. Even when she was apart from Krishna, her mind was flowing in a constant stream towards her Lord, towards her beloved. So we know that one day Radha asked Krishna, "I'm jealous of your flute," she said. Why? Krishna said, "Well, because the flute is always with you. The flute is always held so close to your mouth. I'm very jealous of the flute." So Krishna said, "When you are as empty as the flute, then I will be able to play all my melodies upon you." So somebody who is in this Madhura Bhava, who is thinking of the Lord as a beloved. If you even look at relationships when we have boyfriend, girlfriend, or fiancé, fiancée, when that relationship is new, each one is always thinking of the other, not with effort, not with difficulty, not forcing the mind to think about the beloved, but very naturally, very spontaneously, just a flow of love going out towards the beloved. So this can happen when self-interest takes a back place. That means it becomes empty like a flute. When we stop thinking about our own needs, ourself, about the definition of our persona, and we are focusing entirely upon the Lord as a beloved, then we are empty like a flute. There is no self-interest. So then it is easy to offer ourselves to the Lord. So these are the 6 relationships which the scriptures define, often taken up by devotees. We don't think and take it up, but it just wells up spontaneously within us, because that is the primary characteristic of our temperament. So whichever appeals, whichever is easy, it is important to get into a constant relationship with God, not spurts, sporadic devotion, but a constant flow of devotion. So we come to Shloka 8. Let's chant it together. Veda Bhavanat Sohamityaso, Veda Bhavanat Sohamityaso, Bhavanabhida Pavani Mata, Bhavanabhida Pavani Mata. So we just discussed 6 bhavas. How to relate to the Lord with a certain attitude. But here, there, Ramana said, the Lord is there, the devotee is there. Between the Lord and the devotee, there is a constant stream of devotion flowing. Now in this shloka, Bhagwan seems to be making a contradiction. Let us look at the meaning of the shloka. Bheda Bhavanat. Bheda is separation. Bheda Bhavanat is with a feeling of separation. So when we worship the Lord or when we meditate upon the Lord with the feeling of separation that I am a devotee and the Lord is different from me, then better than that, better than this kind of an attitude where I am separate and God is separate is so aham ityasau. So aham, I am he, or I am she, or I am that. The feeling that I am not separate from the Lord. Bhavana abhida pavani mata. Bhavana in this case is meditation. Abhida bestows, gives. Pavani mata, much greater purity. So meditation with the feeling that I and the Lord are not different, or I am he, or I am that, bestows far greater purity than meditation, which is performed with a feeling of difference, with the feeling that I am different from the Lord, feeling of separation between devotee and the Lord. So that means we spend quite a bit of time first in Chitta Shuddhi. That means thoughts of me, myself, my own interest starts reducing, and I become more and more focused on the Lord or God. And then I get into a kind of relationship with the Lord, maybe as a child. Maybe I feel I am a child, God is my parent. I feel I am a parent, God is my child. I feel I am a servant of the Lord. I feel that the Lord is my friend. I feel that the Lord is my sibling, or I feel that the Lord is my beloved. So I have to work at this relationship. Anybody who has had friends or who is married and has a spouse, we all know that you have to work at relationships, even with children, even with your own grandchildren, with everybody. You have to work at establishing a stable, healthy, positive, loving relationship. That is with people whom you can see. Now, the Lord is in your mind a form or a name or a concept, not visible outside except maybe through a photograph or a deity. Now with this, it is much more difficult to get into a relationship. So we spend a lot of time nurturing, nourishing this wonderful relationship with the Lord. And then you have to go beyond this. You have to go beyond this relationship to a space, to a place where there is no separation between me and the Lord. So how is this? In what way does this make sense? So for that, I thought looking at the sadhana of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa would give us a lot of deep insights into why this makes sense. Why should we do this? So here at the top left corner, we see Dakshineshwar temple in Calcutta with the Hooghly river flowing past. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he was born as Gadadhar in a village in Bengal. And he was an exceptional child for his devotion and his wonderfully endearing ways with the people of the village. His brother, Ram Prasad, he went to the city of Calcutta in order to earn a living. So since he was a priest and he knew how to perform puja, how to carry out rituals and everything, he was appointed by this Dakshineshwar temple to perform the worship of goddess Kali. So Kali's shrine was the main shrine in this temple. There were sub-shrines all around. So when he went there, he asked Gadadhar, his younger brother, to come and help him. So Gadadhar went, a young boy, he has gone to the temple, and he is helping his brother in this worship. And slowly, his brother's health starts failing. So he tells Gadadhar, I will initiate you into Devi Mantra. You become the Upasak. You start performing the worship instead of me. Initially, Gadadhar is not really very interested, especially because at that time he felt that this temple had been built by Rani Rasmani, who is from the fisherwoman class. So when Gadadhar went to Calcutta, he was very conscious of caste distinctions, and so he said, I really am not very interested in serving in this temple. But in spite of that, his brother persuaded him, and he initiated him into the Kali mantra, and Gadadhar started performing Kali Puja. So every day he would perform Kali Puja with a lot of sincerity, very ritualistic worship. And as he went on doing it, he developed a relationship with God. What was his relationship? I am a child and this is mother. Goddess Kali is my mother. She nurtures me. She takes care of me. She is everything to me. Slowly this relationship started getting strengthened till an intensity developed inside him, and he said, I want to see you, mother. Unless I see you, I cannot be content. So then he saw within himself there were many things which needed to be purified. First thing was his feeling that some castes are superior and some castes are inferior. So he started working on this. Many people would come to the temple. They would all sit and they would be given food. Annadana would happen. So he said, wherever the lower caste sit, I will go, and he would eat their leftovers from their plates. He would take away the leaves. He would clean that place. And slowly he started overcoming the caste distinctions. Then he would sit on the bank of the Ganges river, and he used to throw, this is a rupee, this is a clod of earth, rupee, clod of earth, so that may I never feel that one object is more important than another object. I should have equipoise of mind. So like this, he did many things to go beyond raga and dvesha, like and dislike, which rule our lives actually. From the morning when we get up, we start thinking, today I feel like drinking coffee or I feel like drinking tea. I don't like milk, I like coffee. I don't like coffee, I like milk. I don't like bread, I like idli. So like this, from the smallest decision to the biggest decision, we are ruled by likes and dislikes. And likes and dislikes come from vasanas within us, residues. So Ramakrishna Paramahamsa purified, he did Chitta Shuddhi very consciously. By himself, he went on doing a lot of Chitta Shuddhi. Then after many years of this, it is said that sometimes when he could not see Goddess Kali, still he would roll on the floor in Agani, from one end of the shrine to the other, and he would cry and sob. And somebody who came to the temple to visit the temple at the time, they would say, oh, poor man, his mother must have died today. Look at him, he's in such great sorrow, poor thing. But actually he would be weeping because he wants to see the Divine Mother. Such was his intensity. So when this intensity was there, one day he felt it is too much. He's not able to tolerate it. So there was a sword hanging in the shrine. He picked up that sword and he said, Mother, if you don't appear in front of me, I will chop off my head. And it is said that at that time, the goddess appeared to him as an ocean of light, peace and bliss. And after that, Goddess Kali would walk with him. Now and then she would come, she would walk with him, she would eat with him, she would let him feed her. So his worshipping became very strange. When he has to offer a prasad to the goddess, he feels that goddess is inside him, he will start eating the prasad, or he will feed the prasad to a cat that comes there. So these kinds of things started happening, but Kali was now not an abstract deity, nor was she a statue of stone inside the temple. She was a moving, living, loving deity who was always with him, his own wonderful divine mother. So when it was like this, a guru called Bhairavi Brahmani, her name was Yogeshwari, she came to Dakshineshwar, and she took Ramakrishna Paramahamsa through a complete tantric sadhana, Vaishnava and tantric sadhana. So he came, went through all that, and his mind became very, very stabilized in Kali. Constantly there was a flow between him and Kali. That current could never be cut. It was uninterrupted flow. So in this state, when this was happening, by then almost 10 to 11 years of sadhana has been put into of effort has been put in. Then we see on the left, just below the temple, we see Guru Totapuri. So Advaitin, a Vedantic Advaitin called Totapuri. You can see gigantic person. He had a monastery in Punjab. He had 700 monks under him for whose spiritual welfare he was responsible. He was established in the self. So he would never stay in any place more than 3 days because he was a parivrajak. He kept moving from place to place. No attachment can be developed to any place when you don't stay there for a long time. So he came to Dakshineshwar. He saw Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and immediately he asked him, would you like to go into Vedantic sadhana? You are very ripe for it. I can see the time has come for you to go into Vedantic sadhana. Will you go into Vedantic sadhana? Will you be initiated? So immediately Ramakrishna Paramahamsa agreed. So he used to call Totapuri Nangta. Nangta means the naked one. So he said, Nangta, I agree. So Totapuri initiated him first into sannyas, and then he told him, look, the Divine Mother whom you have been worshipping till now, she is none other than absolute consciousness. She is none other than the self. It is just that you are worshipping the self in this name and form. This name and form has appealed to you. It is pulling your mind. It has the capacity to hold your mind magnetically at one point. It means a lot to you, means more to you than your own well-being. So you have been worshipping her with great intensity till now. But do you realize that the name and form of the Divine Mother are actually only a container for consciousness? The self, it's an appearance in the self. The self is like an ocean, and the Divine Mother is like a wave on the ocean. The particular wave that appeals to you. But she is actually none other than your own self. So you need to go beyond the form. Because as long as you are still relating only to the form and the name, you are still limited. It means that you are still attached to your own body, mind, and intellect. When you think of yourself as the body, mind, and intellect, you will think of the God also, the God whom you worship, also as a body, mind, that you'll think of it as a form and a name. But there comes a point when you have to go beyond that. You have to transcend the name and form. Transcending the name and form does not mean that you will no longer have reverence for a particular form, or it only means that you have understood that that form is one appearance of your own self. Every form is an appearance of your own self. So you are now relating to the substratum on which the form is there. The substratum which is even giving life to that particular form that you are worshipping. That substratum is consciousness, that substratum is awareness, that substratum is your own self. So go beyond the form. Going beyond the form only means recognizing that that form represents your own self. That form appears limited, but your self is unlimited. So instead of relating only to that name and form, you are relating to the substratum on which that form is an appearance. So Ramakrishna understood. Intellectually, he understood all this. And then when Totapuri said, sit down, just sit down, close your eyes and relate to the self. Don't think of the form of the mother. Don't think of the name of the mother. Just think of the substratum. Think of awareness. Think of consciousness. So Ramakrishna Paramahamsa closes his eyes and he says, the Divine Mother comes. The minute he closes his eyes, the form of the Divine Mother is coming. Her bewitching smile is there. Her sparkling eyes are there. Her gaze of grace is there. And he says, Nangta, I can't do this. I'm sorry, I can't do this. The minute I close my eyes, the mother comes. And when the mother comes, I'm captured. I'm enchanted. I'm enraptured. I'm not able to move beyond. So this goes on for a few days. Then Totapuri one day, he says, today it is enough. You sit here. He finds a piece of glass that has fallen there. He takes that piece of glass and he pierces between the eyebrows and he tells Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, keep your attention there. When the Divine Mother comes now, use the sword of your discrimination to cut her in half. So Ramakrishna Paramahamsa closes his eyes. Again, the bewitching form of the Divine Mother. It is there in his mind. And he uses the sword of discrimination. How? It is not an actual sword. What does he use? He uses his viveka. He says, Mother, you are beautiful. You have nourished me. You have nurtured me. You have brought me till this stage. But you are also an appearance on the ocean of the self, on the ocean of consciousness. You are the self, but only you are not the self. The self is unlimited. The self is all-pervading. And the self is me. I am that self. Till now I thought you are different from me. But we are not different. Both of us are nurtured by the self. And it is to that self that I turn now. So using Viveka, he went beyond the form and he got established in the formless. He got established in the self. And Totapuri, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was so absorbed in the self, he did not come back to transactional awareness for about 3 days. Then Totapuri was very surprised. He said, for me, it took 40 years of sadhana to go beyond the form. To be established in the self took me 40 years of sadhana. Great austerities performed on the bank of the river Narmada. But in just a matter of a few days, this great being has become established in the bliss of the self. So this is a path. Even Vedanta outlines this path for us. First, we turn to God when we don't want something or we want something. Then we get into a relationship with God and we nurture that relationship till we have a continuous stream of devotion flowing towards the deity or the object of devotion. Then after that, that separation which is there between the God and the devotee, that separation has to be removed. So to remove that separation, Viveka has to be used. Discrimination has to be used. When discrimination is used, then we are established in the self, going from the form to the formless. So when we focus on a form and the mind becomes very pure and there is this continuous stream of love flowing, then that same deity which we are worshipping will send a guru who is a jnani, a guru who is established in that self. And that guru will point out the way to us how to become established permanently in the self. So this is the route that is given to us. I think for today, since it is now 7:10, I was thinking that we can spend some time in questions if there are any, and a little more time in the in sadhana. So I will stop sharing at this point.
You have to stop sharing.
I've stopped sharing.
Stop sharing.
So if we have any questions, we can. Not coming there. You can either type in the chat window. Or you can unmute and ask also. Do we have to necessarily go from the form to the formless? In one lifetime, it may not always be necessary, but maybe in some lifetime we would have done that sadhana. If it is not in this lifetime, it may have come from some other lifetime. See, basically it is that it is difficult for us to relate to an abstract concept. If somebody comes and tells you there is an abstract energy called God, so initially it is difficult, which is why the rishis, the sages, they gave a form. In the Vedic times, there was no form. People would relate through the, without any form, they could relate to divinity. But slowly, as the minds became more gross, as minds lost their shuddhata or chitta shuddhi became less, then it became difficult for people to relate to divinity, to see divinity in themselves, to see divinity in others. So then rishis came up with forms. So each form actually symbolizes great truths. So for instance, if you look at Goddess Kali, she has her tongue out. Having the tongue out means a lot of discrimination. She may be carrying a human head in one hand. So that human head means that I am the body, mind, and intellect, the false belief, which we call the ego. So that has been removed. It has been beheaded. Or we see that Goddess Kali in Dakshineshwar, she has her foot resting on the chest of Lord Shiva, who is lying there. So Lord Shiva is the self Lord Shiva is the absolute. Lord Shiva is awareness. Lord Shiva is the substratum. And Goddess Kali is Prakriti. She is Shakti. She is the appearance on the ocean of consciousness. She is the creation that we see all around us. But the substratum is Shiva. So all these, the symbology is built into every form. So we need to understand the symbology. We need to understand why we are worshipping. We need to understand what is the purpose of this worship. So it is easy for us to relate to somebody when that person is in front of us with a name and form. So generally it starts like that. The relationship with God begins like that because it's an easy way to do. And it is good to nurture that till there is Ekachintana, till there is Chitta Shuddhata. Then you have to move beyond that to the substratum. Do we have to can I give up my form and body to join him? Giving up the form is only mental. Mentally, we need to drop the idea that I am the body, mind, and intellect. The entire sadhana that we do is only for this. The separation between me and God is being created by the thought that I am this body, mind, and intellect, and God is that form that I see. So when I drop the belief that I am the body, mind, and intellect, automatically there is nothing else to be done. There is no unity to be sought. Dropping the false identity, dropping this false belief, which is disempowering me, that itself is the whole sadhana. What is left is only the self. What's the difference between me and God? You can't do miracles. Is it I am a small part of God? Before that, please clarify how Ramakrishna could see Kali. Do you mean that he saw Kali as a flesh and blood form next to him? He could touch her, he could talk to her, he could see her as I can see somebody sitting next to me, somebody walking next to me. So that was how real that whole form was for him. God, actually, miracle, Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, Shankaracharya, all the Upanishads, they all say that the greatest miracle is being established in the self, because any other miracle is also within the realm of appearance. It's also within the realm of mind. If somebody can cure another person's illness, let us say, perform a miracle or a siddhi to cure somebody, that person is cured. But after that, into that person's life, some other trouble will come. From morning till night, pinpricks are there. So the pinpricks will make that person oscillate from frustration to anger, to sadness, to peace, to boredom. So the only miracle which can always give you permanent happiness, that miracle is only being established in your true nature. That is the greatest miracle. All other miracles are actually likened to a dream, things that happen in a dream. When you wake up from the dream, everything that you saw in the dream, or you tasted, or you touched in the dream is gone. It just disappears. So all other miracles are like that. They are also temporary. But being established in the self is the only miracle that can give us permanent peace and happiness. In the Bhagavata Puranam, it says, in Kali Yuga, Bhakti Yoga will liberate you. So if you sing or chant bhajans, is it okay? So as we know that Bhagavata also gives a progression for bhakti. The same Bhagavata, which you are quoting here, it also gives a progression for bhakti. It says you begin by listening, Shravana. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Padasevanam, Archanam, it goes on till Atmanivedanam. So there is a progression. The starting point is listening to the glories of God. And then from there, you start singing the glories of God. Then you start serving God in everybody. So like that, you go on doing it till you become empty of self-interest, at which point you will be able to offer yourself to God, as Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said. It's offering yourself to God means you completely let go of the identification that I am separate from God, that I am this body, mind, and intellect. When you let go of that separation, when you let go of that false identity which we have formed, which we have falsely attached ourselves to, then automatically what is left is only God. So it is good, you can start by singing or chanting bhajans, but you should be aware that that is not the end point. It is the starting point. Is it not true that all of us in our lifetime, sometime or the other, have become different types of devotees like Artha, Artharthi, Jignasu, Jnani, etc.? Yes, it is true. We have gone through all these phases. We keep going through all these phases, which is why Bhagavan says, make it a constant stream. Instead of sporadic stream, make it constant. Even the Jnani is firmly established in the self all the time. Continued form worship, giving reality to the form. They refuse to accept Ishvara is Anatma. As per Advaita, is it not a contradiction, Vaniji? We see this is generalizing a lot. When we say all Jnanis, it is not true that all Jnanis. Every Jnani, see even Shankaracharya, who was established in his self, he created paths for everybody. There are people at different levels of evolution. When you are dealing with a large number of people, Shankaracharya was dealing with the entire population of India in that day. So some people need to be in alignment with the form. Some people need to go beyond the form. So for all, there are sadhanas. If you see, there is sadhana of puja. In puja, there are many different kinds of puja. Then you come to Manasika Puja. That means without any ingredients, actually, you're doing Manasika Puja. Then from Manasika Puja, you start going to Japa. So in Japa, you will be chanting only one name. And then slowly you will start focusing on one form and one name. And then from focusing on one form and one name, you start coming into a relationship with that form and name. Then from relationship, you will go beyond the name and form. So it is an entire progression. So anybody who came to uplift people, to take them forward on the spiritual path, many of them may have given paths for anybody along this hierarchy. Hierarchy, I'm saying only as what you need at that point of time. Somebody needs a name and form, they get a name and form. Somebody needs only mantra, they get only mantra. Somebody needs Manasika Puja, they get it. Somebody needs to go beyond all this, they get that also. So that's the whole beauty. There is no, what shall I say, stigma. If you are doing form worship, no stigma. If it is needed for us at that time, that is the right thing. We are doing japa, we feel very good about it, continue to do it. At the same time, we should not block ourselves off saying, this is it. We should stay open and remember the goal is that. The goal is that I should be established in myself. So at the right time, when the right opportunities open up, people will come, Jnanis will come, Gurus will come, who will take you to the next step, and then they will come and take you to the next step. But for that, we need to be open. We should not be too attached to the sadhana that we are doing. Remember, it is a means, it is not the end. So every sadhana is a means. Means you take, you come to the end of that road, then you have to take the turn into the next road and then into the next. So it is like that. So we have to dedicate ourselves to that process with openness and with intensity. So I am soul energy and God is whole universe energy. We both have the same energy, but God's energy is everywhere and mine only in me. That is our present understanding. But Ramana Maharshi is saying, the Upanishads are saying, there is no separation. That separation is of my own making. That is my belief, which I have nurtured from a long time. So I think that is so. So the entire process that we did till now, starting from the first shloka till we have come to the 8th shloka, I think today, it is exploring and seeing whether this is true. So we need to explore and see, is this true? And then Bhagavan is saying it is not actually true. What is true is there is only the self. There is no God self and myself. There is only the self, one self, one substratum. There is one screen, many movies are projected on that screen, but the screen is the same. So you, I, God, we are all that screen. We are not different. That is what Bhagavan is saying here. So I am soul energy and God, but I don't have power to bless or punish people. That power God has. I am not having his power to punish. God also has no power to punish people. During Karma Yoga, when we explored the first few shlokas of Karma Yoga, we saw that what comes as our fate or destiny is only our own past action. So with every action, we have something to learn because we are not empathetic towards other people. So we become more and more empathetic, more loving, more understanding by experiencing the fruit of my past action. If I have hurt somebody, that comes back to me as hurt. And when I'm going through that hurt, I understand, okay, this is what it feels like. So next time, I become more careful about how I behave with people. I don't want to hurt them so much. So it is a process of our own past actions coming back to teach us what we need to know. When we have done something good to others, that comes back as good to me to encourage me. Okay, you have done the right thing and this is what is required to be done. And I think that is a reward, but it is not actually a reward. It's my own past action coming back. When I've done something hurtful to others, it comes back to me as some hurtful circumstance or relationship, and I learn from that. So God neither punishes nor rewards. Our own past action will come and teach us, that's all. We should not look at it as punishment or reward.
Mr. Kailash Chawla has a question.
Yeah. What about the belief in Dvaitam, that we are part of the divine and we merge with him or her? So God doesn't anything just come on.
Everything's fine. It's beautiful. I loved it.
Oh, thank you so much. So these systems of Dvaita, Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, again are bandwidths. All of us, we need different bandwidths. So a master or a jnani will come to lead different bandwidths of people. So if there are a lot of people who need the bandwidth of worshipping the form and name at that point of time, that jnani will come and give that path. Then there are more people ready for moving beyond name and form. A jnani will come and give a path to that bandwidth. So it is more like, I would look at Dvaita, Vishishta Dvaita, Advaita as phases in our own spiritual evolution. In the beginning, I feel I am the body, mind, and intellect. I feel God is a certain form. I relate to my own, I have power over other people, so I can punish or I can reward other people. Just like that, God has the power to punish or reward me. That is the basic starting point. Then I start evolving, my mind becomes fine-tuned, my chitta becomes purer and purer. Then I start feeling God is a all-pervading energy. God is always benevolent, because my own feelings become more benevolent. I become more and more benevolent towards everybody. I don't have this habit of using the power to punish or reward. I become more benevolent. So my idea of God also evolves. God is always benevolent. God is very close to me. God is ever with me. So that is like Vishishta Advaita, very close. then more evolution. Then you see that God is the substratum. Without God, without the self, nothing can exist. So the essence is only the self. Therefore, I am not different from God. So it is like different phases in our own spiritual growth. So if the questions are over, I think we can spend 5 minutes in meditation.
Madam, can I ask you one thing, madam?
Yeah.
Shall I just ask you something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Nirvikara Rupam from Nirvana Shatakam.
Correct.
Yes? Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, madam.
Okay. So let us just take a meditative posture. What is the concept that God sends angels to help us? See, at all these things are again, there is a whole hierarchy in creation. This creation, there is the manifestation of the Lord, and the Lord manifests as all different things. And there are, just like the Prime Minister has IAS officers, like that Ishvara, or the manifest form of the divine, which is the creator and sustainer of this entire creation, will have angels, devas, who will take care of different aspects of creation. So as long as we are relating to the form of a God and we are relating to the form of an angel, we need to understand that we are still within the realm of the mind only. So all this is within the realm of the mind. Name and form is always within the realm of the mind. So any such experiences are always within the realm of the mind. So to be established in the self, we need to go beyond this name and form, beyond the realm of the mind. As we keep going, we have only come up to the 8th shloka, remember, we have 30 shlokas. So Bhagwan is holding our hand and taking us step by step. So in the next shlokas, Bhagwan is also going to give us answers about how to keep going beyond the mind, how to relate to the self, how to get established in the self. That entire roadmap is still remaining for us to travel. And we'll see what that roadmap is as we go along. Self means good energy. Self does not mean good energy. Self means the total awareness. The awareness because of which we are able to see and understand. It is the witness within us. The witness knows. I know that I know something. I know that I don't know something. Both I know only because of this witness within me, this knowing principle within me. So that knowing principle is self. So I think we'll stop questions for now. If you have any more, you can keep them for the next session, or I will type my number here. 9663329799. If you want, you can WhatsApp me or you can call me and we can discuss questions if there are any more. Only one last question is there. I'll just answer that and we'll stop. Does that tell us about our evolution stage, or we keep meditating? Irrespective of past karmas, we evolve. Is that possible? Yes. We don't need to know at what stage we are. It is like planting a seed. Then every day I dig up and I see, is that seed sprouting? So assessment is not required. All that is required is engagement in what I can do now. So we just go on doing what we can do and things will take care of themselves. Okay, so let us sit with our spine straight, eyes slightly closed. Become aware of your breathing. deep and slow breathing. Feel your whole mind becoming calm, quiet. Within you is the direct experience that you exist. Very simple, very direct. Every moment you're aware that you exist. I am. I know that I am. I exist. I am aware that I exist. It's just a very strong feeling within us, which requires no proof. We don't need any of our senses to tell us that we exist. Nobody else has to validate our existence. I know very directly, it's the only thing I know. I exist. Just stay there. Bhagavan used to say, just be. All you have to do is just be. Chumma it. Just be. This is a formless state, just pure existence, awareness. Awareness of your own existence. As pure being, you are. Anytime during the day, you can come back to this form of pure being. I exist. That's all you need to do whenever you can. A few minutes, a few seconds, half an hour, whatever you can spare. Any time of the day between tasks. Let us offer our gratitude at the lotus feet of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi for the wonderful wisdom that he gave us today. May this wisdom nourish us, nurture us, establish us in the self permanently.